with every bit of his might through the crowd. The soldiers tried to shoot Newton, but reporters jumped in the way to take pictures in good lighting, keeping him from shooting. Newton quickly ran into a spaceship and held up a device that looked exactly like a hand grenade and told everyone to leave, or he would take everyone with him. As the scientists and military officials fell out of the small spaceship, Newton quickly threw the crystals into the fuel department and pressed the button, closing the door. Suddenly, 5 soldiers began to aim their machine guns at the spaceship. "No!" shouted Newton with fear. He quickly pressed the button to the ship's force field, causing the ship to glow, and accidentally killing 5 scientists and 2 soldiers when the force field came on and shattered them. "Fire!" shouted the sergeant. "Fire!" shouted the sergeant. The little spaceship was rained on by machine gun bullets, but the force field reduced the bullet's strength to that of spitwads. "We're going to do it, Sheena. We are going to escape this hellish planet, and they can't stop us," shouted Newton with excitement. He then began pressing buttons to get the thing to take off. "Newton, look out!" shouted Sheena with fear. Newton looked through the window and saw a soldier running toward them with a bazooka. "Oh, no, you don't," shouted Newton as he pressed a button to the ship's propulsion system. The ship began to make a loud humming sound. It lost a little of its glow, then lifted off the ground, crashing up through the roof of the storage building. Suddenly, Newton and Sheena were knocked from their seats when the ship was hit from the bazooka blast. The two saw a tank getting ready to fire. Newton pressed down on a lever, and the little ship began to fly forward. As Newton and Sheena tried to make their escape, the general, who was determined to destroy or capture Newton at any cost, heard about the escape and told the broadcasters of Sardana to broadcast on the radios that if Newton wanted to see his offspring alive and well, he had better stop his escape. But since Newton didn't have the radio on, he continued to make his escape. The general got the report that Newton was headed in the direction of the city he and Newton's children were in. The general ordered the Air Force to stop Newton at all costs. Everyone on the planet had their fingers crossed in the hopes that the jets with their guided missiles would be able to stop Newton this time. The last time Sardana was attacked by someone called Newton, their strongest air force wasn't a jet, but a biplane. The general had soldiers The general had soldiers force Shirley and Jeff out onto the roof of the 80-story skyscraper they were held hostage on, in the hopes that if Newton saw them, he'd stop for them so the general could fire on them. As Jeff was shoved out into the bright afternoon sun, he turned to the general and shouted angrily, "Your jets won't have any luck against my dad. My dad is the great Newton, and no one can stop him." "That's right," said Shirley proudly. "Newton's gone up against spaceships that could vaporize planets, and he defeated them all." "Yes, but your dad is a man now. His luck is running out," General Zelnos shouted the general. "General Zelnos, look," said one of his assistants. They all looked north and saw Newton's spaceship. Spacecraft approaching at 100 miles per hour. "How come he's going so slow?" asked the bewildered Shirley. Jeff said, "Gee, Shirley, you don't know? The batteries to the impulse engines have to be charged first before the ship can go any faster and escape the planet. If he tried to escape now, the power of the crystals would flare up and destroy the impulse engine." "When will they be able to warp out of the atmosphere?" "Not for another 10 minutes at least. Plus the engines have never been used yet." "Hurry! Attack the Newton now, before it's too late!" shouted the general into his walkie-talkie. He had overheard Jeff and was now telling of Newton's weakness to the Air Force, telling them that they had better attack now before Newton's engines were charged. And right after that, 6 1960-looking jets roared into the sky over the city to stop Newton in his tracks. Newton saw the jets approaching and told Sheena to close her eyes and hang on. Just think of yourself enjoying a roller coaster ride. At my age, replied an old, shaky Sheena with fear in her eyes. I'll try to make the ride as dull as possible for you, okay? Sheena laughed. Suddenly, the approaching jets assumed attacking formation. The people in the city looked up into the sky and wondered if they should take cover. All the radios were playing the threat to Newton instead of warning them to escape a falling Newton ship. Newton flew over the most densely populated area of the city and just hovered there, thinking the jets wouldn't dare fire at him over a crowded city with high-rises. Getting before his engines are charged, shouted the general. Fire, shouted the captain of the squadron. Suddenly, a jet zoomed in and began firing its machine guns at Newton. No, shouted Shirley and Jeff. Yes, shouted the general. We must not let him leave the atmosphere, shouted the general insanely. Newton was shocked as two more jets screamed in and fired their machine guns into the force field. Suddenly, a missile was fired from the next jet that exploded in the force field and shook the ship about violently, causing a few sparks to shoot out of the force field, scaring Sheena and making her cry. Damn them, shouted Newton. They have no respect for me or the people down below. Well, if that's the way they want to play it. Newton had the craft quickly shoot to the side in an effort to avoid the guided missile. But the missile was so fast and the ship was hit that the ship was hit again. No, shouted Jeff and Shirley with fear. The people in the city began to panic and run about. In order to avoid any more missiles, Newton had his ship dip down and swing around close to the skyscrapers below in the city. But the missiles were too fast and the ship was too slow, causing Newton and Sheena to be hit again. Shirley began to panic. When she saw another missile hit her parents, she started crying. She ran up to the general and begged him to call off the Air Force. Stop it! They're killing them, she cried. The general turned and shouted insanely at her. Yes, and they will die. As your dad killed my dad, so shall I kill him. So shall I kill him. As your dad killed my dad, so shall I kill him. And he made a maniac laugh. And the craft was hit again, causing more electrical fires and sparks to shoot out of the controls. Newton desperately turned to his crying old wife and said, Sheena, I don't want to use this, but I'm going to have to. It's the only thing that will save us, but it might hurt you. Suddenly another missile was fired at them. Newton quickly pressed a precarious-looking button on the side of his seat, causing the craft to shoot to the side at an incredibly fast speed, causing the missile to completely miss them and slam into the side of a skyscraper, blowing glass and people out of its side. The general became stunned by the new maneuver of Newton. To compensate, he ordered 3 jets to fire at the same time. Newton pressed the button again, and again the missiles missed, causing mass destruction down in the city below. So horrifying was the scene that the people didn't know where to run. Get on him! Get on him, ordered the general. A jet got really close to Newton, then it ended up exploding into the side of a skyscraper. Yay! Cheered Shirley and Jeff. 1 down and 5 more to go. A jet chased Newton down into a street, firing its machine guns at him, killing the people in the streets. Newton quickly pressed the button again, causing the ship to quickly shoot to the side and make a quick turn down another street. The jet tried the same maneuver, but it was going so fast that it ended up plowing into the edge of a building, taking out a row of rooms 30 stories above the streets. It exploded. Its explosion rained more death and destruction on the crowd. In order to keep from killing the people below, Newton had his ship fly up and away from the city, before remaining jets followed. The leading jet fired its last rocket. Newton suddenly got an idea of how to stop them. He had his ship zoom at 1,000 miles per hour up to the nearest jet to him, causing the guided missile to go back on itself. Then he'd quickly shoot to the side, and the missile would strike the other jet. After 2 jets crashed and exploded into the streets and buildings below, the general ordered to quit firing. The last two jets just circled Newton, awaiting orders. "We did it, Sheena, we did it! We made it so they can't fire on us without it destroying them. Now we can leave for home." Newton suddenly realized that Sheena didn't reply. He turned and saw Sheena looking lifeless at him. "Sheena, no, you can't be." A tear rolled down her withered cheek. Sheena raised a shaky hand, then dropped it. Newton then realized that all that ducking and dodging missiles had really taken their toll on Sheena, and that any more of it would probably kill her. Newton quickly pressed the button to the air conditioner to get rid of as much smoke as possible. "Sheena, please don't die on me," he begged. Newton begged. How come he's not leaving?" wondered Jeff. "He has the power to now escape the planet." "I'm hurt bad," Sheena managed to say. Newton then swore that he wouldn't do any more fancy acrobatics that produced G-forces like that again. It was a wrong time to quit, though, because the general ordered another jet to go against Newton. This jet was the military's latest jet, and it contained guided missiles that were very fast and were very deadly with a powerful explosion. Plus, if the missiles were suddenly avoided, they would instantly explode. Newton had a hell of a time now. The pilot who flew this jet was ruthless and enjoyed firing on Newton, even though several of his missiles were causing great explosions, fires, and death down in the city too. The citizens were terrified, but they cheered whenever a missile hit or exploded around Newton. By the time the jet only had one missile left, a quarter of the city was destroyed in flames and destruction, and Newton's ship was fluttering about in the atmosphere over the outskirts of the smoke-filled city, with electrical fires shooting out all over the control panels. So damaged was the spacecraft now that it would never be able to make it to the other side of the sun. Newton had the ship headed straight for the coast. He turned slowly and looked sadly at Sheena. Sheena looked like she was about to pass out. "We're not going to make it, are we?" asked Sheena sadly. Newton tried to hide his emotions of despair, but couldn't. He sadly put a cassette tape containing the song they enjoyed on their honeymoon and put it into the tape player. "I wanted to play this on our trip through space," he said. Back in the city, Shirley and Jeff strained their eyes through the smoke and sadly watched their parents disappear into the horizon with smoke coming out of their craft. "Why don't they leave the atmosphere?" asked Shirley with impatience. Jeff looked depressed and said, "I don't think they can." The general started laughing. He shouted into the radio for the pilot of the superjet to attack. "Gladly," smiled the pilot with pride, and he fired one last missile into the heart of the spacecraft. "No!" shouted the children when they saw the explosion. "Yay!" cheered the people of Sardana. So strong was the explosion that it totally blew away the force field and shattered the glass window, causing a lot of cold wind to blow about the room. Newton found himself all torn and bloody from the shrapnel, and Sheena was cut from the glass. "I told you it was hopeless," she managed to say. Newton started laughing. For some reason, all of this struck him as very funny. He wanted so desperately to build a spaceship that would take him out of all this, and after all the hours of hard calculations and brainstorming, he was now watching the only person he truly loved more than everything dying from rocket fire from a pesky jet plane. And Newton kept on laughing and laughing, a mixture of crying and laughing. Soon the superjet swung in and fired its machine guns. Newton felt a great pain in his hand. Newton felt a great pain in his hand. Pain in his hand. At the same time, he heard Sheena cry out in pain. When he looked about, he found Sheena dead. "No!" shouted Newton with super depression. He went crazy with fury. He madly pressed the button to the speed button and flew 1,000 miles per hour toward the jet that had just killed Sheena. The terrified jet pilot tried to fly away, but Newton pressed another button on the seat, making his spacecraft go faster and faster, passing up the Mach 4 level. The two other jets that were circling tried to stop Newton with their missiles, but Newton was traveling so fast. The superjet but Newton was traveling too fast. The superjet tried to stop Newton by firing its machine guns in Newton's direction, but by the time the bullets did any damage, Newton rammed into it, causing the jet to lose control and explode on a hill below. "Yay!" cheered Shirley and Jeff as they saw it explode in the distance after